Good morning and welcome to Backward Planning for Cloverleaf, or I should just say happy Monday, because I don't know when exactly you'll be accessing this video. I just wanted to say welcome to the Backward Planning course. As promised, I'm going to start sending you out information in this next week about how to access the course and giving you some choices as we go. So the first thing that many of you said are that you would appreciate some videos. So in this video, I'm going to briefly talk you through what will be expected of you in the course, and then in the next video I'll be explaining some more technicalities as far as the options that you have and getting more into specifics there. But one of the things that I noticed from most of you is that you said that you valued examples. So I wanted to go ahead and provide you with some right off the bat. So for those of you who are new to backward planning, we begin most backward plans in what we call stage one, with setting out kind of what's the big picture, what are we trying to get out of this particular unit of study. In my case, I'm going to be thinking about what we're trying to get out of this course. So we start with these enduring understandings and essential questions. We're going to start this one for this particular course with a very, very commonly used enduring understanding. Maybe this is something that you can pick up and immediately use in your classes. You might think, what does this parts impact the whole, whole impacts the parts? What does that even mean? It just sounds like this random, vague cosmic woo-woo thing. But remember that we have a certain percentage of our students, maybe up to 60%, who are actually whole to parts learners, so they want to see what the big picture is. When am I ever going to use this? What does this mean to me? Do I need to know this information? Those types of questions, those come from whole to parts learners. So for those of you who said you appreciated examples, let me give you an example of framing from this big picture point of view. So in this course, we're going to talk about how the parts of Douglas County's backward planning structure need to align so that you have a well-crafted unit plan that fits nicely together as a unified whole. But the whole also impacts parts, and when I say it in that way, I mean what you do for your instruction, what you want to have out of your time with your students at Cloverleaf also impacts how you choose to do your instructional planning, how you choose to do your assessment, what learning opportunities you provide or learning activities you structure for your students. So those things react well with each other. Well, why didn't I just say so? Why was I so vague with parts impact the whole and whole impacts the parts? The reason I was vague on that is because by putting it in those broader terms, then maybe a student later on could be looking at a problem in a math class, or they could be looking at a situation in a social studies class, or they could be looking at something like moving from phonemic awareness and blending of sounds into whole words and how those work. So by keeping it vague, we can have these understandings, students develop these understandings that actually do endure for time and across disciplines and into their life outside of school. So then this essential question, what would we do with that? Well, I have one structured that is a little bit more specific, but why would I have an essential question when I had an enduring understanding? Well, some of our learners respond better to questions than to statements, so it's a simple reason. So in this case, my question is, how do the parts of a planning model and the alignment between those actually play out in daily practice? How do they impact what I do on a day-to-day basis with my students? I didn't specify all that stuff about day-to-day basis with my students in this question because there might be situations where we're talking about a planning model for a project and it has different components. And how do all of those components play together to impact what I do on a daily basis as I'm preparing for that project? So do you see why keeping this stage one and this section of stage one purposefully vague is actually helpful for students who are a little bit more global thinkers? I'm going to move on to the other two parts of a stage one, which are the 21st century skills and the outcomes. In your case for Cloverleaf, your outcomes still focus on the 21st century skills and 4Cs. So we'll talk about that more as we go on. But the 21st century skill that I'm emphasizing in this class is systems thinking. It's all about how different parts impact the whole system. When I think of system, I'm thinking about everything that happens regarding your teaching of your wonderful kids there at Cloverleaf, and how do all the little parts, like how you assess students, the learning activities you provide, the way you treat your kiddos, and instructional planning models like backward planning. How does all of that come together to make a positive experience for your students? And then our outcomes. What do I want from you specifically? Whoops, I'm going to have to hop back to that. What do I want specifically from you at the end of the course? And this is the part of the video that I'm most excited to share with you, although I like the last part pretty well too. So it's kind of a toss-up. But the outcomes for this course, this is what I really care about. How you get to it, I don't really care about. So I will craft learning opportunities for you and different activities that you can choose to take advantage of, but as long as at the end you meet these outcomes, I'm not going to be picky about how you get there. It's a very, very freeing feeling for me to be able to say that to you, and hopefully it's something that you'll be able to, in time, do with some of your students. Obviously, depending on grade level, depending on subject, that may be more or less possible for you. But looking at our course outcomes, you're going to be creating a backward plan, as you know, that Brenda will observe you teaching later in the spring. And so through the creation of that backward plan, I hope you gain enough experience to be able to evaluate for yourself Douglas County's backward planning model and say, is this going to impact my instructional practices in a positive way? Are there pros and cons? How do I feel about that? Which ties into the second outcome, which is reflecting on the congruence between this instructional planning model and your own practices. So to say, hey, where is this like what I've always done? Where is it different from what I've always done? The last piece of modeling and example that I want to give you is down here at the bottom of this slide where it says summative rubric. If I click on that, I get this rubric. This is something that I wanted to model. Obviously, when you're working with your kids, it's a beautiful thing to show them what you expect out of an end product right away at the beginning when you're introducing a lesson, so that those students who like to have that specificity of what's our end game, they can have that right at the beginning. So a few strategies that I use when planning a summative rubric is that I take all of that framing stuff that we just copied or we just talked about, and I copy it and I paste it into the top of the rubric. The reason I do that is just to keep that big picture really visible in my mind as I'm writing the rubric. That way I make sure there aren't any problems with it. Sometimes I get caught up in one part of the lesson and I start focusing on that and I forget that I'm kind of losing sight of that big overall picture. So having that big overall picture right there visible for me is really helpful. It's a strategy that I use and might be helpful for you as well. I also use color coding to help me out. So I am saying, and I mentioned to you earlier, that I want you to be able to evaluate this model after you create your backward plan to say, hey, is this good? How's it going to impact my instructional practices? What's going to change in my life, or what's going to stay the same after I've learned this? And that orange piece that I have highlighted, that's going to come down here, and I just paste the same thing there. Since this piece is all about parts and whole, that aligns with the 21st century skill of systems thinking. So I put those two pieces, the orange and this part, in the same box because they're kind of talking about the same thing. Then I take this green outcome and I put it down here in this box and I color code that one green. They don't have the colors, obviously, because it's orange and green, don't really have anything to do with emergenetics, so if you've had that training, don't even worry. Those are just colors that I picked at random. I expect out of you all that you'll be hitting this 3 area. You're welcome to perform up to the 4 if you would like, but I'll keep working with you until everyone has reached at least this 3 stage. So in the 3, as I mentioned, All I'm looking for out of you is, as you create your backward plan and then you're thinking about it, that you can show me that you've evaluated the function of each stage, stages 1, 2, and 3, with accuracy. I do want you to know correctly what they are, and then to say, yep, that appears to be a really strong thing. I think I'll be using that part of the model, no problem. And then weaknesses, it might be something where you say, well, I'm going to have to tweak that a little bit for it to work for me at Cloverleaf. Also, on the reflection, that you say, hey, this is just like what I've always done. This makes me feel pretty great. I've been ahead of the game all the time and I didn't even know it. Or this part you might say, yeah, this isn't really like what I do here, and maybe I like what I do better. Or maybe I'm going to change what I do. So that's what these two sections are. So I'll be guiding you through those, but as I mentioned before, as long as I see this out of you all and you've created your backward plan, I'm not really very picky about how you get there. I will give you some options. You're welcome to take those, but if you have something else that would work better for you, I'm totally open to that as well. So I hope you have a wonderful day. I'll be following up with additional materials, but I wanted to get you started with just these few examples and the initial framing for our backward planning course. Have a great day.